The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble steps of Buckingham Palace as Sergeant Marcus Thompson adjusted his dress blue uniform one final time. He had dreamed of this moment since joining the Marines 8 years ago, but never imagined it would happen like this. The exchange program between the United States Marine Corps and the British Royal Guards was rare, and Marcus was one of only 3 Marines selected that year. His boots clicked against the polished stone as he approached the main entrance, where a small group of officials waited. Among them stood several Royal Guards in their iconic red tunics and tall bearskin hats. Marcus had seen them in pictures countless times, but seeing them in person was entirely different. They stood perfectly still, their discipline evident in every line of their posture. "Sergeant Thompson," called out Colonel Henderson, the British liaison officer. "Welcome to London. I trust your flight was comfortable?" Marcus snapped to attention. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." As the colonel began explaining the day's schedule, Marcus noticed one of the Royal Guards turn slightly in his direction. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but something about the movement caught his attention. When their eyes met, time seemed to slow. The guard's face was mostly hidden beneath the shadow of the bearskin hat, but Marcus could see bright blue eyes looking directly at him. The moment lasted only seconds before the guard returned to his rigid stance, but something had passed between them. Marcus felt a strange mix of curiosity and recognition, though he was certain they had never met before. He tried to focus on the colonel's words about protocol and procedures, but his thoughts kept drifting back to that brief exchange. The palace was everything Marcus had imagined and more. The ornate decorations, the rich history that seemed to seep from every wall, and the sense of tradition that surrounded everything made him feel like he was walking through a living museum. As they toured the grounds, the colonel explained the daily routines, the changing of the guard ceremony, and the various duties Marcus would be observing during his 3-month assignment. "The Royal Guards are some of the finest soldiers in the world," Colonel Henderson explained as they walked past another group of guards. "Their training is intense, their dedication absolute. You'll find that despite the ceremonial nature of their duties here, these are combat-trained soldiers who have served in conflicts around the globe." Marcus nodded, impressed by what he was hearing. He had always respected professional soldiers, regardless of their nationality, and it was clear that the Royal Guards were held to the highest standards. As they continued the tour, he found himself looking for the guard with the blue eyes, though he wasn't sure why. Later that afternoon, Marcus was introduced to his temporary quarters and given his schedule for the coming weeks. He would be observing various ceremonies, attending briefings on British military traditions, and participating in cultural exchange activities. It was an honor that few Marines ever received, and he was determined to make the most of it. As evening approached, Marcus decided to take a walk around the palace grounds to get his bearings. The tourist crowds had thinned, and the atmosphere was quieter, more peaceful. He found himself near the area where the guards stood during their shifts, though none were currently on duty in that particular spot. "First day treating you well?" came a voice from behind him. Marcus turned to see a young man in civilian clothes approaching. He was tall, with sandy brown hair and those same striking blue eyes Marcus had noticed earlier. Without the bearskin hat and red tunic, he looked completely different, but Marcus was certain this was the guard from that morning. "Yes, it's been incredible," Marcus replied, extending his hand. "I'm Marcus Thompson." "James Wellington," the man replied, shaking Marcus's hand with a firm grip. "Though most people call me James. I was the one standing near the entrance this morning when you arrived." "I thought so," Marcus said, feeling oddly relieved to have his suspicions confirmed. "Your eyes gave you away." James laughed, a warm sound that immediately put Marcus at ease. "My mother always said they'd get me into trouble someday. She was probably right." They began walking together along the garden path, and Marcus found himself genuinely enjoying the conversation. James was intelligent and well-spoken, with a dry sense of humor that reminded Marcus of some of his closest friends back home. Despite their different backgrounds and nationalities, they seemed to have an easy rapport. "How long have you been a Royal Guard?" Marcus asked. 6 years now," James replied. "Started when I was 22, straight out of university. My father served before me and his father before him. It's something of a family tradition." Marcus was impressed. "That's incredible. The discipline required must be intense." "It is," James agreed, "but it's also incredibly rewarding. There's something special about being part of something larger than yourself, protecting traditions that have existed for centuries. I imagine you understand that feeling in the Marines." Marcus nodded. "Absolutely. Different traditions, same sense of purpose." They talked for nearly an hour, discussing their respective military experiences, their families, and their hopes for the future. Marcus learned that James had studied history at Cambridge before joining the Guards, and that he spoke 3 languages fluently. James, in turn, was fascinated by Marcus's stories of growing up in small-town Texas and his decision to join the Marines after high school. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the palace gardens, James glanced at his watch. "I should probably head home," he said reluctantly. "Early morning tomorrow, and you know how it is with military schedules." "Of course," Marcus replied, though he found himself disappointed that their conversation was ending. "Maybe we'll run into each other again during my time here." "I'd like that," James said, and Marcus could tell he meant it. "Actually, if you're interested, there's a pub not far from here where some of the guards like to unwind after duty. Nothing fancy, but good conversation and decent beer. You're welcome to join us sometime." "I'd really like that," Marcus said, surprised by how much he meant it. As James walked away, Marcus remained in the garden for a few more minutes, watching the last rays of sunlight fade behind the palace walls. He had come to London expecting to learn about British military traditions and protocols. What he hadn't expected was to meet someone who challenged his assumptions and made him think about things in new ways. Something told him that this exchange program was going to be far more meaningful than he had originally imagined. The connection he had felt during that brief moment of eye contact earlier in the day hadn't been his imagination. There was something special about James Wellington, something that made Marcus want to know more about him. As he made his way back to his quarters, Marcus found himself looking forward to tomorrow with an anticipation that went beyond his professional duties. For the first time in years, he felt like he was on the verge of discovering something important about himself and the world around him. The alarm clock buzzed at 500 hours, just as it had every morning for the past 8 years of Marcus's military career. But this morning felt different. As he prepared for his second day at Buckingham Palace, he found his thoughts returning to his conversation with James the evening before. There had been something refreshing about talking to someone who understood military life, but came from such a different background. The morning briefing covered the changing of the guard ceremony, one of the most famous traditions associated with the Royal Guards. Marcus watched from a designated observation area as the precision and pageantry unfolded before him. The movements were choreographed to perfection, every step calculated, every gesture meaningful. He spotted James among the guards, his posture impeccable, his focus absolute. During the ceremony, Marcus noticed something remarkable. Despite the tourist crowds, the clicking cameras, and the general chaos that surrounded such public events, the guards maintained their composure completely. They were like islands of calm in a sea of excitement. It reminded him of his own training, where maintaining discipline under pressure was paramount. After the ceremony, Colonel Henderson introduced Marcus to several other members of the Royal Guards unit. Each man he met impressed him with their professionalism and knowledge. They spoke about their experiences serving in Afghanistan and Iraq, their training regimens, and their pride in their ceremonial duties. Marcus began to understand that these weren't just ceremonial soldiers. They were warriors who happened to perform ceremonial functions. "The American seems to be fitting in well," observed Captain Morrison, one of the senior officers, as he watched Marcus engage with the guards. "He's asking good questions," replied Sergeant Major Davies. "Shows genuine interest in understanding our traditions, not just observing them." Later that afternoon, Marcus was reviewing his notes from the day when James appeared at his side during a break in the schedule. Out of uniform again, he looked relaxed and approachable. "How was your first changing of the guard ceremony?" James asked, settling into a nearby chair. "Incredible," Marcus replied honestly. "The precision is unlike anything I've seen." "How long does it take to learn those movements?" "Months of practice for the basics, years to master the subtleties," James explained. Every movement has historical significance. The way we present arms, the angle of our march, even the timing of our steps, it all connects to centuries of tradition. Marcus was fascinated. In the Marines, they had their own traditions, but nothing quite as elaborate as what he was witnessing here. Do you ever feel the weight of all that history? James considered the question carefully. Every day, he said finally. But it's not a burden, it's an honor. When I put on that uniform, I'm not just James Wellington. I'm part of an unbroken chain that stretches back through generations of soldiers who stood in the same places, performed the same duties, protected the same values. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of several other guards who had finished their shifts. Marcus was introduced to Corporal Davies, no relation to the Sergeant Major, Private Harrison, and Lance Corporal Mitchell. Each had their own personality and background, but they shared the same quiet confidence that Marcus had noticed in James. "So you're the American we've been hearing about," said Corporal Davies with a grin. "James here hasn't stopped talking about your conversation yesterday." James shot him a warning look, but Marcus laughed. "All good things, I hope." "He mentioned you were interested in joining us at the pub," Private Harrison said. "If you're free this evening, we usually gather there around 8. Marcus looked at James, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd like that very much." The pub, called the Crown and Anchor, was exactly what Marcus had expected from a traditional English establishment. Dark wood paneling, low lighting, and the comfortable buzz of conversation created an atmosphere that felt both historic and welcoming. The group of guards had claimed a large table in the corner, and they welcomed Marcus warmly. Over pints of bitter and plates of fish and chips, Marcus learned more about his new acquaintances than he had during all the formal briefings. Davies had grown up in Wales and joined the guards to see the world. Harrison was from Manchester and had a wife and 2 young children. Mitchell was the youngest of the group, barely 23 but already showing the leadership qualities that would serve him well in his military career. "What's it like in Texas?" asked Harrison. "I've always wanted to visit America." Marcus found himself describing his hometown, the wide-open spaces, the different pace of life, and the values that had shaped him. The guards listened with genuine interest, asking questions about American military training, the differences between the Marines and other branches, and what had motivated him to pursue this exchange program. "I wanted to understand how other professional military organizations operate," Marcus explained. "The Marines are the finest fighting force in the world, but that doesn't mean we can't learn from others. Watching you perform today, seeing the dedication and precision, it's given me new perspectives on what it means to serve." James had been relatively quiet during most of the conversation, but now he leaned forward. "What strikes me about you, Marcus, is that you're not here to compare or compete. You're here to understand and appreciate. That's rare. Why shouldn't I be?" Marcus replied. "We're all professional soldiers. We all took oaths to serve something greater than ourselves. The specific details might be different, but the core commitment is the same." The conversation continued late into the evening, touching on everything from military tactics to family traditions, from personal goals to shared experiences of military life. Marcus found himself genuinely enjoying the company of these men who just days ago had been complete strangers from a different country and military tradition. As the evening wound down, James walked Marcus back toward the palace grounds. The London streets were quieter now, with only occasional passers-by and the distant sound of traffic. "I'm glad you came tonight," James said as they walked. "The others really enjoyed meeting you." "They're good men," Marcus replied. "I can see why you're proud to serve with them. What's your impression so far?" James asked. "Is this assignment what you expected?" Marcus thought for a moment before answering. "Honestly, it's been different from what I expected, but in the best possible way. I came here thinking I'd be observing military ceremonies and learning about protocols. Instead, I'm discovering that the most important part of any military organization is the people who make it up." James smiled. "That's very true. All the traditions and ceremonies in the world don't mean anything without dedicated people to carry them forward." They had reached the entrance to Marcus's quarters, but neither seemed eager to end the conversation. "Tomorrow I'll be observing the Queen's Guard duties," Marcus said. "Will you be on duty?" "I will," James replied. "It's one of our most important assignments. The responsibility is enormous, but it's also one of the most rewarding aspects of what we do. I'm looking forward to seeing it, Marcus said, and thank you for tonight. For including me, for making me feel welcome. It means more than you might realize. You're easy to include, James replied simply. You fit in naturally. As Marcus prepared for bed that night, he reflected on how much his perspective had changed in just 2 days. He had arrived in London with respect for the British military, but limited understanding of their culture and traditions. Now he was beginning to see the Royal Guards not as exotic foreigners, but as fellow professionals who shared his commitment to service and excellence. More than that, he was discovering friendships that transcended national boundaries and cultural differences. The connection he felt with James and the other guards was based on shared values and mutual respect, rather than similarity of background. Tomorrow would bring new experiences and new insights. But tonight Marcus fell asleep, feeling grateful for the unexpected direction his assignment was taking. Sometimes the most valuable lessons came not from formal training or official briefings, but from simple human connections, formed over conversations and shared experiences. The 3rd week of Marcus's assignment brought an unexpected challenge that would test both his adaptability and his growing friendship with James. A security alert had been raised following intelligence reports of potential threats to the royal family, and the entire palace guard routine was shifting to heightened readiness protocols. Marcus found himself in a unique position as an observer during this critical period. The casual atmosphere of his first days was replaced by the focused intensity he recognized from his own combat deployments. Every guard was alert, every procedure double-checked, every detail scrutinized for potential security implications. This is when our real training shows, James explained during a brief break between shifts. Despite the increased tension, he appeared calm and focused. Anyone can perform ceremonies when everything is routine. It's during situations like this that you discover what kind of soldier you really are. Marcus watched as the guards seamlessly transitioned from their ceremonial duties to a more tactical mindset. The same precision that characterized their parade movements now applied to security protocols, communication procedures, and threat assessment activities. It was impressive to witness professionals adapting to changing circumstances while maintaining their high standards. Colonel Henderson invited Marcus to observe the command center operations during this period, giving him insight into how decisions were made and how information flowed through the chain of command. The British approach to crisis management was methodical and thorough, with multiple layers of backup plans and contingency procedures. What do you think of our response protocols? Asked Colonel Henderson as they watched the coordinated activities. Very thorough, Marcus replied honestly. The transition from ceremonial to operational status was smoother than I expected. Your people are well trained for multiple scenarios. That's exactly the point, the colonel explained. The ceremonial duties are important, but they're built on a foundation of genuine military capability. These men are soldiers first, guards second. During this heightened security period, Marcus noticed that his conversations with James took on a different quality. The casual friendship they had been developing deepened into something more substantial, as they discussed the serious nature of their responsibilities and the weight of protecting others. Do you ever question what you're doing? James asked one evening as they walked through the palace gardens during a security patrol. The question seemed to come from nowhere, but Marcus sensed it was something James had been thinking about for some time. What do you mean? Marcus replied. Standing guard, following orders, dedicating your life to serving institutions and ideals that most people take for granted, James clarified. Do you ever wonder if it's worth it? Marcus considered the question carefully. It was the kind of conversation he rarely had with fellow Marines who generally shared similar motivations and backgrounds. But James seemed to be seeking something deeper than casual conversation. I think about it sometimes, Marcus admitted, especially when I see friends from high school who are making more money, have more freedom, live more comfortable lives. But then I remember why I chose this path in the first place. Why did you choose it? James asked. Because some things are bigger than personal comfort or convenience, Marcus said. Freedom, justice, protecting people who can't protect themselves. These aren't abstract concepts to me. They're real things that require real people to defend them. James nodded slowly. I joined because of family tradition. but I've stayed for reasons similar to yours. There's something satisfying about being part of something that matters, even when nobody notices or appreciates it. Their conversation was interrupted by a radio call requiring James to return to his post, but the exchange stuck with Marcus throughout the rest of the evening. He realized that beneath James's polished exterior and family military background was someone who thought deeply about the meaning of service and the sacrifices it required. The security alert was resolved after 4 days when the intelligence reports proved to be false alarms. Normal routines resumed, but Marcus noticed that his relationship with the guards had changed during that period. He was no longer just an observer or a visiting curiosity. He had become someone they trusted and respected as a fellow professional. "You handled that well," Captain Morrison commented to Marcus after the all-clear was given. "Stayed out of the way when you needed to, asked intelligent questions when appropriate, and showed genuine understanding of what we were dealing with." "Thank you, sir," Marcus replied. "It was educational to see how you handle crisis situations. There are definitely techniques I'll be taking back with me." That weekend, James invited Marcus to visit his family home outside London. It was the first time Marcus had been away from the palace grounds since his arrival, and he was curious to see a different side of British life. The Wellington family estate was smaller than Marcus had expected, but beautifully maintained, with gardens that spoke of generations of careful attention. James's parents, both in their 60s, welcomed Marcus with warmth and genuine interest in his background and experiences. "James has told us quite a bit about you," said Mrs. Wellington as she served tea in the family sitting room. "He seems to have been quite impressed with your perspectives on military service." "The feeling is mutual," Marcus replied. "Your son is an exceptional soldier and has helped me understand so much about British military traditions." During dinner, Marcus learned more about the Wellington family's military history. James's father had served in the Falklands conflict. His grandfather had fought in World War II, and the family tree included soldiers dating back to the Napoleonic Wars. Military service wasn't just a career choice for James, it was part of his family's identity. But James almost didn't join, his mother revealed, much to James's obvious embarrassment. He was accepted to graduate school in history and considered becoming a professor instead. "What changed your mind?" Marcus asked James. 11, James replied simply. "I was at university when it happened, and I realized that studying history wasn't enough for me. I wanted to be part of making history, not just reading about it." Marcus understood that feeling completely. Many of his own friends had been motivated by similar events to choose military service over other career paths. After dinner, James showed Marcus around the family property, including a small museum room where military artifacts from various generations were displayed. Medals, photographs, letters, and uniforms created a visual timeline of the family's military service. "This is what I meant about feeling the weight of history," James explained as they looked at a display case containing his great-grandfather's World War I medals. "Every time I put on my uniform, I'm carrying forward something that started long before me and will continue long after I'm gone." Marcus was moved by the display and by James's obvious pride in his family's heritage. It gave him new appreciation for the depth of tradition that shaped British military culture. "Your family has given a lot to their country," Marcus observed. "So has yours," James replied. "Maybe not in the same way, but choosing to serve when you could have chosen easier paths, that's its own kind of sacrifice." As they drove back to London that evening, Marcus found himself thinking about the differences and similarities between his own path to military service and James's. They had arrived at similar destinations from very different starting points, but their commitment to their duties was equally strong. "Thank you for today," Marcus said as they reached the palace. "Meeting your family, seeing where you come from, it helps me understand you better." "I'm glad you enjoyed it," James replied. "They liked you too. My mother mentioned that you're welcome back anytime." "I'd like that," Marcus said, and realized he meant it more than he had expected. That night, as Marcus wrote in the journal he was keeping for his official report, he found himself struggling to put into words the personal connections he was forming. The assignment was supposed to be about observing British military procedures and protocols, but it was becoming something much more significant. He was discovering that professional respect could develop into genuine friendship across cultural and national boundaries. More importantly, he was learning that shared values and mutual understanding could create bonds that transcended the differences in background and experience. With still several weeks remaining in his assignment, Marcus looked forward to continuing, to deepen these relationships and to learning more about himself in the process. The 5th week of Marcus's assignment brought an unexpected development that would test both his professional judgment and his personal relationships. Word came down through official channels that his exchange program was being featured in a joint military publication, and photographers would be documenting his experiences for an article about international cooperation between allied forces. Marcus had mixed feelings about the attention. While he understood the public relations value of showcasing successful military cooperation, he had come to value the authentic relationships he was building with the guards. The presence of cameras and journalists would inevitably change the dynamic of his remaining time at the palace. "How do you feel about being in the spotlight?" James asked when Marcus shared the news with him. "Honestly, I'd rather focus on learning and building relationships without the distraction," Marcus replied. "But I understand why this kind of visibility is important for both our organizations." The photography session was scheduled for the following week, coinciding with a major ceremonial event that would showcase both British traditions and Marcus's integration into the palace routine. In preparation, Marcus found himself briefed not only on the ceremony itself but also on how to present the exchange program in the best possible light. Colonel Henderson pulled Marcus aside for a private conversation about the upcoming media attention. "This is an opportunity to demonstrate the value of international military cooperation," the colonel explained. "Your experience here has been positive, and that story needs to be told effectively." "I understand, sir," Marcus replied. "Is there anything specific I should emphasize or avoid during the interviews?" "Just be honest about what you've learned and experienced," the colonel advised. "The authentic nature of your relationships with our people is the real story here." As the media day approached, Marcus noticed subtle changes in his interactions with the guards. Some became slightly more formal, conscious that their conversations might be overheard or photographed. Others seemed excited about the opportunity to showcase their work to a broader audience. James fell somewhere in between, neither changing his behavior significantly nor showing particular enthusiasm for the attention. "Are you worried about being in the publication?" Marcus asked James during one of their evening walks. "Not worried exactly," James replied, "but I do wonder how it might change things. Right now, what we have here feels natural and genuine. Media attention has a way of making everything feel staged even when it isn't." Marcus understood James's concern. The relationships he had built over the past several weeks were based on mutual respect and shared experiences, not on photo opportunities or official statements. He hoped that the media attention wouldn't undermine the authentic connections he had made. The day of the photography session dawned clear and bright, perfect for the outdoor ceremony that would be the centerpiece of the coverage. Marcus dressed in his best uniform and prepared to represent both himself and the Marine Corps in the most professional manner possible. The photographers and journalists were respectful and unobtrusive, but their presence was still noticeable. Marcus could see some of the guards adjusting their behavior slightly, perhaps standing a little straighter or speaking more formally than usual. It wasn't dramatic, but it was enough to change the atmosphere. During the ceremony, Marcus found himself in the unusual position of being both participant and subject of documentation. He was genuinely engaged in observing the precision and pageantry of the event, but he was also aware that his reactions and interactions were being captured for public consumption. The interview portion proved more comfortable than Marcus had expected. The journalist was well prepared and asked thoughtful questions about his experiences, his impressions of British military culture, and the value of international military exchanges. "What has surprised you most about your time here?" the journalist asked. "The depth of professionalism and the genuine warrior spirit of the Royal Guards," Marcus replied honestly. "Before coming here, I understood their ceremonial role, but I didn't fully appreciate their combat capabilities and their dedication to continuous improvement. How have your relationships with the British soldiers developed?" "Beyond professional respect into genuine friendship," Marcus said, glancing at James, who was standing nearby in formation. We've discovered that shared values and commitment to service create bonds that transcend national boundaries. The questions continued for nearly an hour, covering everything from specific training comparisons to broader thoughts about international cooperation. Marcus found himself speaking not just about official protocols and procedures, but about the personal connections that had made his experience meaningful. After the formal interviews, the photographer wanted to capture some candid moments of Marcus interacting with the guards during their off-duty time. This proved more challenging, as genuine candidness was difficult to achieve when everyone knew they were being photographed. Just act naturally, the photographer encouraged, but everyone understood the contradiction inherent in that instruction. Eventually, the media team finished their work and departed, leaving behind a sense of relief among the guards. The ceremony had gone well, the interviews had been professional, and the photographs would undoubtedly showcase the exchange program positively. How do you think that went? James asked Marcus as they walked back to their quarters. Better than I feared, not as natural as I hoped, Marcus replied honestly. I think the story will be positive, but I'm glad it's over. The questions seemed fair, James observed. And you handled them well. Nothing that misrepresented your experience or our organization. That evening, the group gathered at the Crown and Anchor for what had become their regular weekly meeting. The media day had left everyone feeling slightly drained, and there was a collective desire to return to their normal, unphotographed interactions. To privacy, toasted Corporal Davies, raising his pint. To authentic friendships, Marcus added, raising his own glass. As the evening progressed, the guards seemed to relax back into their normal personalities, and Marcus felt the genuine connections he valued returning to the forefront. The media attention had been a temporary disruption, but it hadn't fundamentally changed the relationships he had built. However, the experience had made Marcus more aware of how precious these genuine connections were, and how easily they could be affected by external pressures. He found himself more appreciative of the honest conversations and natural interactions that had characterized his best moments during the assignment. I've been thinking about what you said in the interview, James mentioned as they walked back together, about professional respect developing into genuine friendship. It's true, isn't it? Marcus replied. I came here expecting to learn about ceremonies and protocols. Instead, I've learned about people and discovered friendships that I hope will continue long after this assignment ends. I hope so too, James said. It would be a shame to lose touch after you return to America. We won't, Marcus said with conviction. This isn't the kind of connection that ends just because of geography. The next few days brought a return to normal routine, and Marcus found himself reflecting on how the media attention had affected his perspective. While he was proud to represent his country and his branch of service, he realized that the most valuable aspects of his experience couldn't be captured in photographs or interview quotes. The real story was in the late-night conversations about purpose and service, the moments of mutual respect during challenging situations, and the gradual development of trust and friendship between people from different cultures and military traditions. As his assignment moved into its final phase, Marcus became more conscious of making the most of his remaining time. The media coverage would eventually be published and forgotten, but the relationships he was building would last much longer. Colonel Henderson approached Marcus a few days later with feedback about the media session. The preliminary reports are very positive, the colonel informed him. The journalists were impressed with your professionalism and your genuine enthusiasm for the experience. I think this will reflect well on both the exchange program and the participants. I'm glad to hear that, sir, Marcus replied. I tried to be honest about what this experience has meant to me. That authenticity came through clearly, the colonel said, and it's exactly what we hope to achieve with this program. As Marcus prepared for his final weeks at the palace, he realized that the media attention, while temporarily disruptive, had actually helped him clarify what was most important about his experience. It wasn't the official recognition or the public relations value. It was the personal growth and the genuine relationships that would continue to influence him long after he returned home. The unexpected challenge had ultimately strengthened his appreciation for the authentic connections he had made and his commitment to maintaining them beyond the end of his assignment. The 7th week of Marcus's assignment brought a crisis that would test every relationship he had built and challenge his understanding of loyalty, friendship, and professional duty. It began with a routine morning briefing that quickly became anything but routine. Colonel Henderson's expression was grave as he addressed the small group of officers and senior personnel gathered in the briefing room. "We have a situation that requires immediate attention and absolute discretion," he began, his voice carrying a weight that immediately commanded everyone's attention. Marcus found himself included in this high-level briefing, a sign of how fully he had been integrated into the palace security structure. As the colonel outlined the situation, Marcus felt his stomach tighten with concern. Intelligence reports had identified a potential security breach within the palace guard unit itself. Someone with access to sensitive information had been passing details about security protocols and schedules to unauthorized parties. The investigation was in its early stages, but several guards were under suspicion, including some that Marcus had come to know well. "The investigation must be conducted with complete secrecy," Colonel Henderson emphasized. "No one outside this room can know about these suspicions until we have concrete evidence. That includes friends, colleagues, and anyone else who might be affected by the outcome." Marcus's mind immediately went to James and the other guards he had befriended. Were any of them under suspicion? How could he continue to interact normally with people who might be subjects of an ongoing investigation? The weight of this knowledge felt enormous. After the briefing, Marcus struggled to process what he had learned. The possibility that someone he had grown to trust and respect might be betraying that trust was deeply unsettling. Worse still, he was now bound by his oath and his professional duty to keep this information secret, even from people he considered friends. When James approached him later that morning with his usual friendly greeting, Marcus found it difficult to respond naturally. How do you carry on a normal conversation when you know something that could potentially affect that person's entire career and freedom? "You seem distracted today," James observed as they walked between duty stations. "Everything all right?" "Just thinking about some things back home," Marcus replied, hating himself for the deception but knowing he had no choice. "You know how it is, even when you're having a great experience. Your mind sometimes wanders to what's waiting for you." James accepted the explanation, but Marcus could see a flicker of concern in his eyes. The natural ease of their friendship was being strained by Marcus's need to maintain secrecy about the investigation. Over the next few days, Marcus watched his friends with new eyes, looking for any signs of suspicious behavior or guilty conscience. It was a horrible way to observe people he cared about, and it made him feel like he was betraying their trust even as he maintained his professional obligations. Corporal Davies seemed more nervous than usual during formations. Was that normal anxiety, or was there something more? Private Harrison had been asking more questions about security procedures lately. Was that genuine professional interest, or was he gathering intelligence? Every interaction became tinged with suspicion and doubt. The worst part was watching James, who continued to treat Marcus with the same warmth and openness that had characterized their friendship from the beginning. If James was involved in the security breach, he was either an exceptional actor or genuinely innocent. If he was innocent, then Marcus was viewing a friend through an unfairly suspicious lens. "You've been different this week," James commented one evening as they sat in the palace gardens, quieter, more withdrawn. "Are you sure everything is okay?" Marcus struggled with how to respond. He wanted desperately to confide in James to share his concerns and get his perspective on the situation. But his professional duty was clear. He could not compromise an ongoing investigation, regardless of his personal feelings. "I've been reflecting on how much my time here has meant to me," Marcus said, which was true even if it wasn't the complete truth. "It's made me think about loyalty, friendship, and how we choose who to trust." "Those are heavy thoughts," James observed. "Has something happened to make you question those things?" The question felt like a test, though Marcus couldn't be sure whether it was intentional or innocent. "Not exactly," he replied carefully. "I guess being away from home, being immersed in a different culture, it makes you think about what really matters and who you can really count on." James nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that feeling. Military life creates unique bonds, but it also creates unique pressures. Sometimes the two conflict with each other." Again, Marcus found himself analyzing James's words for hidden meaning. Was he speaking philosophically, or was he hinting at his own internal conflicts between loyalty to his unit and some other allegiance? The investigation continued for another week, with Marcus feeling increasingly isolated by his knowledge of what was happening. He found himself avoiding some of his usual interactions with the guards, afraid that his discomfort would give away what he knew. The strain was affecting his sleep, his appetite, and his ability to focus on the educational aspects of his assignment. Colonel Henderson called Marcus into his office midway through the second week of the investigation. "I can see this situation is affecting you," the colonel observed. "I want you to know that your discretion is appreciated, and I understand how difficult it must be to maintain normal relationships while carrying this knowledge." "It is challenging, sir," Marcus admitted. "These men have become friends, and it's hard to interact normally when there's this cloud of suspicion hanging over everything. That's exactly why investigations like this must be conducted with such care," the colonel explained. "We cannot allow suspicion to destroy unit cohesion unless we have solid evidence of wrongdoing. But we also cannot ignore potential security threats." "Have there been any developments?" Marcus asked. "Some. We've been able to eliminate several individuals from suspicion based on their access patterns and verified whereabouts during key timeframes. But we still have several people who remain under investigation." Marcus wanted to ask whether James was among those eliminated or still under suspicion, but he knew the colonel wouldn't and shouldn't share that information with him. The breakthrough came unexpectedly on a Thursday afternoon. Marcus was observing a routine security briefing when one of the guards who had been under investigation, Lance Corporal Mitchell, the youngest member of their group, requested a private meeting with Colonel Henderson. Within hours, Mitchell had confessed to passing information to unauthorized parties, explaining that he had been blackmailed over gambling debts and had seen no other way out of his situation. The relief Marcus felt was overwhelming, not just because the investigation was resolved, but because James and the others he had grown closest to were cleared of any wrongdoing. Mitchell was immediately removed from duty and would face court-martial proceedings, but the rest of the unit could return to normal operations. Colonel Henderson briefed Marcus privately on the resolution. "I wanted you to know immediately that your friends are in the clear," the colonel said, understanding the personal stake Marcus had in the outcome. "Lance Corporal Mitchell was acting alone, and his confession has been verified through multiple sources." "I'm relieved," Marcus said, and the depth of his relief surprised him. "But I also feel terrible for Mitchell. He seemed like a good person who made a bad decision." "Unfortunately, that's often how these situations develop," the colonel replied. "Good people sometimes find themselves in impossible circumstances and make poor choices. It's a reminder of why we have support systems and why it's important for soldiers to seek help before problems become crises." That evening, Marcus joined his friends at the Crown and Anchor, feeling like he could genuinely relax in their company for the first time in 2 weeks. The investigation hadn't been announced to the general guard population, so they were unaware of what had been happening behind the scenes. "You seem much more like yourself tonight," James observed. "Whatever was bothering you seems to have resolved itself." "Something like that," Marcus replied, wishing he could share the full story, but knowing that some aspects would remain classified. "I guess I was just going through a rough patch, but it's past now." The conversation flowed easily, and Marcus realized how much he had missed the natural camaraderie of these gatherings. The forced distance and artificial suspicion of the past 2 weeks had made him appreciate even more the genuine connections he had formed. As they walked back to the palace that night, James brought up a topic that caught Marcus off guard. "I've been thinking about what you said about loyalty and trust," James said. "It made me realize how rare it is to find people you can really count on, people who won't let you down even when things get difficult." "It is rare," Marcus agreed, thinking about how his secret knowledge had tested his own loyalty to James during the investigation. "I want you to know that you're one of those people for me," James continued. "Whatever brought us together during your time here, I'm grateful for it. You've become the kind of friend I know I can trust completely." Marcus was moved by James's words and also struck by their irony. James was expressing complete trust in him at the very moment when Marcus was reflecting on how he had been unable to fully trust James during the investigation. "The feeling is mutual," Marcus replied, meaning it completely. "This assignment has given me friendships I never expected to find." As his remaining time at the palace continued to dwindle, Marcus reflected on how the investigation crisis had affected him and his relationships. It had been a difficult period, but it had also taught him important lessons about the complexity of loyalty, the value of trust, and the strength of genuine friendships to survive challenges and misunderstandings. The experience had also reinforced his respect for the professional standards and integrity of the Royal Guards as an organization. They had handled a serious security breach with discretion, thoroughness, and fairness, protecting both the institution and the individuals involved. With only 2 weeks remaining in his assignment, Marcus found himself facing a decision that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his future. The opportunity came from an unexpected source during what should have been a routine administrative meeting. General Patricia Williams, the highest-ranking American military officer in the European theater, had arrived at Buckingham Palace for a scheduled visit with her British counterparts. As part of the diplomatic protocol, she requested a briefing on the exchange program and specifically asked to meet with Marcus to discuss his experiences. The meeting was held in one of the palace's formal conference rooms, with Colonel Henderson and several other senior officers present. Marcus had prepared for what he assumed would be a standard debrief about his observations and recommendations for future exchange programs. Sergeant Thompson, General Williams began after the initial pleasantries. "I've been following your assignment here with great interest. The reports I've received suggest that you've not only excelled in your observational duties, but have also made significant contributions to international military cooperation." "Thank you." "Ma'am," Marcus replied, "it's been an honor to represent the Marine Corps in this capacity. I'm going to be direct with you," the general continued. "We're developing a new program for enhanced international military cooperation, and we need Marines who have proven their ability to work effectively across cultural and organizational boundaries. Based on your performance here, I'd like to offer you the opportunity to be part of something groundbreaking." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "I'd be honored to hear more about it, ma'am." General Williams outlined a program that would involve extended assignments with allied military forces, developing new training protocols for international cooperation, and eventually leading similar exchange programs around the world. It was an opportunity that could define his entire military career and potentially set him on a path toward senior leadership, roles he had never imagined possible. The program would begin with an additional 6-month assignment here in London, working directly with British military planners to develop new cooperation frameworks, the general explained. From there, you'd rotate through assignments with other NATO allies, gaining experience with multiple military cultures and systems. The offer was extraordinary, and Marcus knew it represented the kind of career opportunity that came along once in a lifetime. But it also meant making a commitment that would significantly alter his planned future and require him to spend extended periods away from the United States. "What kind of time frame are we talking about?" Marcus asked. "Initially, a 3-year commitment to the program," General Williams replied, "with the possibility of extension based on program needs and your performance. You'd maintain your current rank and pay scale, with additional allowances for overseas duty." Marcus's mind raced as he considered the implications. 3 years of international assignments would mean missing important family events, delaying personal relationships, and potentially changing the entire trajectory of his life. But it also represented an opportunity to be part of something important and innovative. "When would you need an answer, ma'am?" "I understand this is a significant decision," the general said. "Take the remainder of your current assignment to consider it. I'll need your answer before you return to the United States." After the meeting, Marcus walked through the palace grounds in a daze, trying to process what had just happened. The opportunity was incredible, but the timing felt overwhelming. Just when he had been preparing to return home and resume his normal military career, everything had been turned upside down. James found him sitting on a bench in the gardens that evening, staring off into space. "You look like someone who just received unexpected news," James observed, settling onto the bench beside him. "You could say that," Marcus replied, still struggling to organize his thoughts. "Good news or bad news?" "I'm not sure yet," Marcus said honestly. "Maybe both." James waited patiently for Marcus to continue, demonstrating the kind of understanding that had characterized their friendship from the beginning. "I've been offered an opportunity that could change my entire career," Marcus finally explained. "But accepting it would mean giving up a lot of other things I've been planning." "What kind of opportunity?" James asked. Marcus outlined the general's offer, watching James's expression change from curiosity to understanding, to something that looked like sadness. That sounds like an incredible opportunity, James said when Marcus finished. Exactly the kind of assignment that could set you up for a remarkable career. It is, Marcus agreed. But it also means starting over, giving up the life I had planned, and spending years away from everything familiar. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, each lost in his own thoughts. Finally, James spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "If you hadn't come here, if you hadn't had these experiences over the past few months, what would your answer be?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "Probably no," he admitted. 3 months ago, I would have been focused on returning home, getting promoted within my current unit and following a predictable career path. And now? Now I'm not sure what I want, Marcus said. This assignment has shown me possibilities I never considered before. It's made me think about service in broader terms, about the value of building bridges between different military cultures. It sounds like you already know your answer, James said gently. Maybe, Marcus replied. But knowing what you should do and being ready to do it aren't the same thing. Over the next few days, Marcus found himself discussing the opportunity with various people whose opinions he valued. Colonel Henderson was enthusiastic about the program and encouraged Marcus to consider it seriously. The other guards he had befriended were supportive, but also expressed disappointment at the thought of losing touch with him. "Whatever you decide," Corporal Davies said during one of their evening conversations, "make sure you're choosing what's best for you, not what other people expect." "How do you figure out what's best for you?" Marcus asked. "Think about where you want to be in 10 years, Davies suggested. "Not just professionally, but personally. What kind of person do you want to be, and which path is more likely to get you there?" Marcus spent long hours walking through London, trying to envision his future under both scenarios. If he returned home, he would be safe and comfortable following a path that was familiar and predictable. If he accepted the new assignment, he would be stepping into the unknown, with all the risks and opportunities that entailed. The decision became even more complicated when James shared some news of his own. "I've been offered a transfer to a special assignment," James told Marcus as they walked along the Thames one evening. "It's with a joint British-American training unit that's being developed. The timing would coincide with your extended assignment if you decide to accept it." "What kind of training unit?" Marcus asked, intrigued. "Cross-cultural military cooperation, similar to what you'd be working on," James explained. "It seems that both our organizations are moving in the same direction when it comes to international partnerships." The possibility of continuing to work with James, even in a different capacity, added another dimension to Marcus's decision-making process. Their friendship had become one of the most valuable aspects of his entire assignment, and the thought of maintaining that connection while pursuing his career was appealing. But Marcus also recognized the danger of making major life decisions based primarily on personal relationships rather than professional considerations. He needed to evaluate the opportunity on its own merits, not just on the basis of who else might be involved. As his decision deadline approached, Marcus found himself thinking about a conversation he'd had with his father before leaving for London. His father, a veteran himself, had told him that the best opportunities often came disguised as complications, and that the choices that scared you the most were usually the ones worth making. The more Marcus thought about it, the more he realized that his reluctance to accept the opportunity was based primarily on fear of the unknown, rather than any rational assessment of its value. The final evening at the Crown and Anchor was unlike any other gathering Marcus had experienced during his 3 months in London. The atmosphere was charged with emotion as he prepared to share his decision with the friends who had become like family to him during his assignment. James, Corporal Davies, Private Harrison, and several other guards had assembled for what they assumed would be a farewell dinner before Marcus's return to the United States. The mood was bittersweet, with everyone celebrating the success of the exchange program while acknowledging the sadness of saying goodbye. "Before we get too deep into our farewells," Marcus began, his heart racing with nervous excitement, "I have some news that's going to surprise all of you." The group fell silent, sensing from his tone that this wasn't going to be a simple thank you speech. "I've been offered an opportunity to extend my assignment here and become part of a new international cooperation program," Marcus continued, watching their faces carefully. "After a lot of consideration, I've decided to accept." The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Davies let out a whoop of excitement. Harrison raised his glass in an impromptu toast, and James's face broke into a grin that Marcus had never seen before. "Are you serious?" James asked, his voice filled with disbelief and joy. "You're staying?" "Not exactly staying," Marcus clarified, laughing at their enthusiasm. "But I'll be spending at least the next 3 years working on international military cooperation projects, starting with 6 more months here in London." The questions came rapidly. What would he be doing? Where would he be stationed? How had this opportunity come about? Marcus did his best to explain the program and his role in it, but found himself focusing more on what it meant personally than on the professional details. "This assignment changed how I think about service and about my career," Marcus explained. 3 months ago, I thought I had my future all planned out. Then I came here and discovered possibilities I'd never considered. The relationships I've built, the perspectives I've gained, the work we could do together, it all seemed too important to walk away from. What about your plans back home?" Harrison asked. "Weren't you expecting to return to your unit?" "I was," Marcus admitted, "and giving up those plans wasn't easy. But sometimes the best opportunities are the ones that force you to reconsider everything you thought you wanted." James had been unusually quiet during the conversation, and Marcus could see that he was processing the news carefully. "What made you decide to stay?" James asked finally. Marcus thought about how to answer honestly without making it seem like his decision was based solely on their friendship. "Several things," he said. "The work itself is important and aligns with what I believe about the future of international security. The career opportunities are extraordinary. But if I'm completely honest, the relationships I've built here played a significant role. Not just with you," he said, looking at James, "but with all of you. I realized that I'd found something here that I didn't want to lose." "And there's more good news," James said, his smile returning. "I mentioned that transfer opportunity I'd been offered. I accepted it yesterday. It looks like we'll be working together on this joint training initiative." The celebration that followed was spontaneous and heartfelt. The other guards seemed genuinely thrilled that Marcus would be staying, and they immediately began making plans for future gatherings and activities. For the first time since receiving the offer, Marcus felt completely confident in his decision. Colonel Henderson joined them later in the evening, having heard about Marcus's decision through official channels. "I'm delighted you've chosen to join our extended family," the colonel said, raising his glass to Marcus. "Your contributions during these past 3 months have been remarkable, and I look forward to seeing what you accomplish in this new role." "Thank you, sir," Marcus replied. "I'm excited about the challenges ahead." "You should be," the colonel said. "The program you're joining has the potential to reshape how allied militaries work together. Your American perspective, combined with the understanding you've developed of our British approaches, makes you uniquely qualified to help build those bridges." As the evening wound down, Marcus found himself walking back to the palace with James, just as they had done so many times over the past 3 months. But tonight felt different. Instead of an ending, it was a new beginning. "I have to admit," James said as they walked, "I was dreading tonight. The thought of saying goodbye and not knowing when we'd see each other again was harder than I expected." "I felt the same way," Marcus admitted. "It was actually one of the factors that helped me realize how much this experience has meant to me." "What do you think will happen now?" James asked. "With the new program, with our assignments, with everything that's changing?" "I don't know exactly," Marcus replied, "but I'm excited to find out. 3 months ago, I thought I had my life figured out. Now I realize that the best adventures come when you're willing to let your plans change." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, both reflecting on the unexpected direction their friendship had taken and the opportunities that lay ahead. "There's something I want to say," James said as they approached the palace gates. "When you first arrived here, I saw you as an interesting visitor, someone who might provide a different perspective for a few months before returning to his normal life. I never expected to find a genuine friend, someone whose presence would make me reconsider my own assumptions and goals." "The feeling is entirely mutual," Marcus replied. "I came here expecting to observe and learn about British military traditions. Instead, I discovered things about myself I didn't know existed. 2 unexpected friendships and new beginnings," James said, extending his hand. "To taking chances and making changes," Marcus replied, shaking his friend's hand firmly. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of administrative changes, new briefings, and preparation for Marcus's expanded role. His official status changed from visiting observer to program participant, and he found himself involved in planning sessions for initiatives that would affect military cooperation across multiple allied nations. General Williams visited again to officially welcome Marcus to the program and outline his specific responsibilities. You're going to be pioneering approaches that could influence military cooperation for decades to come, she told him during their private meeting. The work you do here will serve as a model for similar programs worldwide. I understand the responsibility, ma'am, Marcus replied. I won't let you down. I'm confident you won't, the general said. You've already proven your ability to build bridges between different military cultures. Now we need you to help us systematize those approaches so they can be replicated elsewhere. As Marcus settled into his new role, he reflected on the series of events that had brought him to this point. A routine assignment had become a life-changing experience. Casual friendships had developed into deep, personal connections, and what was supposed to be a temporary diversion had become the foundation for an entirely new career path. The young man who had arrived in London 3 months earlier, with a clear plan for his future, bore little resemblance to the person who was now preparing to spend years working on international military cooperation. The change hadn't been sudden or dramatic. It had evolved gradually through daily interactions, shared experiences, and the gradual realization that some opportunities are too important to pass up. 6 months later, as Marcus stood before a group of senior military leaders from 6 different nations, presenting the preliminary results of the new cooperation protocols he had helped develop, he thought about that first moment when his eyes had met James's across the palace courtyard. Neither of them could have predicted where that simple exchange of glances would lead. A moment of curious recognition had evolved into friendship, professional collaboration, and ultimately a complete transformation of Marcus's understanding of what his military career could become. James was in the audience for the presentation, now serving as a liaison between British and American training units. As Marcus concluded his remarks and took questions from the international audience, he caught James's eye and saw the same approval and pride that had characterized their friendship from the beginning. After the presentation, as representatives from various nations discussed implementation strategies for the new protocols, James approached Marcus with a familiar smile. Impressive work, he said, though I have to admit I'm not entirely surprised. You've always had a talent for bringing people together. It's been a team effort, Marcus replied. None of this would have been possible without the relationships we built during those first few months. To think it all started with a simple exchange of glances, James observed. Sometimes the most important moments in our lives begin with the smallest gestures, Marcus replied, thinking about all the ways his life had changed since that first day at Buckingham Palace. As they walked together toward the next phase of their continuing partnership, both men understood that they had been part of something larger than themselves. What had begun as a routine military exchange had evolved into a model for international cooperation that would influence military partnerships for years to come.